Hi, this is Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling Associates, and I'm the author of Managing Abandonment Issues Through Recovery, and I'm currently working on a book on shame called Healing Toxic Shame Through Recovery. So you notice the titles of the books is Through Recovery. Everybody knows what a recovering alcoholic is. It's just an alcoholic who admits that they're an alcoholic, and they go to AA meetings and they quit drinking. Well, recovery isn't just for drug addicts and alcoholics. Let me define recovery as just knowing the truth about yourself and working effectively on your issues. I think everybody in our country, everybody in the world could use some recovery, because everybody has wounds from their childhood, and they many times have addictions that are more subtle than alcohol or drugs. It might be food, could be work, it could be playing video games, it could be a lot of things, that even good things that they use to medicate their feelings so they don't have to feel shame, for instance. So this morning I got a call from a fellow. I was on the beach in Treasure Island, and we had a phone session. The topic of our video today is, well, how does one recover from shame? How does that work? Well, I got this phone call from this fellow, and he says, well, he asked me basically that question. He sort of served me up a softball and said, my wife won't forgive me, and when she doesn't nurture me and show affection, I don't feel good enough. I feel shame. How do I fix it? And this fellow is a counter-dependent, and he's sort of black and white thinker, and he wants results yesterday. How do I fix my shame now? And I told him, well, as with every aspect of the recovery process, recovery begins with having insight into yourself. So the more insight that you can gain into yourself, the better off you're going to be. Good therapy is about truth. And truth isn't always, something that bashes up against you and tells you your faults. Many times the hardest truths for people to accept have to do with being gracious and forgiving and kind with oneself. So I told this fellow that he isn't anything more than 50% of the marital problems that he acted out in the ways he acted out due to the wounds of his childhood, which were many, and that he needs to learn how to be patient, and that he needs to learn how to be gracious and to not shame himself. Sometimes our spouses shame us because one, that's who they are, two, that's what we recruited them to do, and three, we allow it. So I want to share a story along these lines. Many years ago, I was in a gym playing basketball, and I think it was some kind of league of some sort, and we were tussling in the game, and a fella hit me with an elbow in the mouth, and the insightful book writing, busy, successful therapist, I didn't turn to this fellow and say, you've hurt my feelings by throwing that elbow to my choppers, and I'd like to share my feelings with you at this time. That's not what I did. I threw an elbow back, and things got a little dicey out on the court. So when I went to the bench, I could hear the wives behind me talking, and one of them said, well, those guys were just so immature. And it probably did look like immaturity and wasn't adult behavior, certainly. But but it wasn't about immaturity. What it was about was I grew up in a scrapping family. I grew up in a family that was filled with aggression, and psychologically, I'd been trading elbows with family members my whole life, and it was my nature. Long before I was a therapist, long before I was in recovery, I was a smith. And if you throw an elbow at a smith, you better put a mouth guard in because you're going to get you some back. So, it doesn't excuse that behavior. I don't want to act like that. But when it happened, I wasn't shaming myself as being this immature, bad person. I was telling the truth to myself, and that is, work on that. Try to heal, rage and competitiveness and insecurity from your childhood, but don't beat up on yourself and say, that was out of character. It was in character, I'm afraid to say. So I told this fellow, be accountable, work on your issues, go to 12-step meetings, listen to your wife, but don't shame yourself. She picked you for the express purpose of so that you could control her, criticize her, and abandon her. So be repentant, be remorseful, make amends, but do not shame yourself. So the first thing how recovery works is constantly being told and having insight into the fact that you're not a bad person, you're a good person, but you've acted out because of some very deep wounds inside you. And that happens to be the truth. That's not an excuse. So the second process in recovery is what I call deep processing. This was taken from a book that I read many, many years ago, back in the early 90s, by an author named Ann Wilson Schaaf. And deep processing is, we all have wounds from our childhood. I picture them like they're in this freezer and they're frozen feelings. And what recovery does is it opens the freezer door and unplugs the freezer. And then all those frozen feelings from our childhood can come up and come out. So deep processing is these feelings surfacing and then just feeling them one at a time. And they sort of come in waves. A deep process could be sadness, could be tears. This fellow that I was speaking with this morning has abuse issues from his childhood, and he's got a lot of crying to do. But they can also, in a non-victim-y way, the feelings can be some of empowerment and anger. So feeling a sense of healthy anger about the things that you experienced in your childhood. I have a quote from Charles Dickens, who wrote this quote in a book called Great Expectations. He wrote, "Heaven knows we need never be ashamed of our tears, for they are rain upon the blinding dust of earth, overlaying our hard hearts. I was better after I had cried than before, more sorry, more aware of my own ingratitude, more gentle." That's a killer quote. I'm going to read it again. "Heaven knows we need never be ashamed of our tears, for they are rain upon the blinding dust of earth, overlaying our hard hearts. I was better after I had cried than before, more sorry, more aware of my ingratitude, more gentle." That's deep processing. You will be better after a good, long, sobbing cry. It will make you more gentle. It'll make you more connected to yourself. It'll make you more remorseful. It'll make you more sensitive. It'll make you a better man. It'll make you a better woman. So it'll flush the system out. It's like you're carrying a bunch of poison around inside you. And what deprocessing will do is it just flushes out your system. And then it collects again, and then a week later you might need to have another good long cry. In my own therapy work, the best therapy sessions I've ever had is where I show up, I sort of lay back on the couch and just cry for an hour. Don't say 5 words the whole session. Therapist just hands me tissues, this was years ago, I haven't had one of these of late, and wipe off the tears, write a check, go home. Fabulous therapy session. A lot of great healing takes place. So that's basically it. That's how recovery works, is seeing things, and that presupposes a humble, broken, teachable heart where you're able to know things about yourself. You're not defensive. You're feeling your feelings. And then there's this flow of, basically there's a sad inner child at your core, and it's just handing that inner child a hanky and say, do what you need to do. I'm not covering up the pain anymore. I'm going to feel it. So that's how it works. Do that a lot for a lot of years, and your shame issues will get significantly better. I'm not a big one for techniques or tools. They seem sort of corny to me. I don't think recovery is about techniques or tools. I think it's about feeling and about knowing. So I'm not going to give you a list of 20 tools or techniques to use, because the truth is, you'll read the book, you'll do the techniques and tools, for that first month or so while you're reading the book, but 3 years from now, you're not going to remember any of them. But you will be able to remember and be impacted and changed by major insights into yourself, and by having offloaded tons of wounded child pain by doing deep process work. So basically what it consists of is a whole lot of either individual therapy, or if you're in a coupleship, a whole lot of couple therapy. The pace that my couples that I work with, they come every other week for couples therapy for about 3 years minimum, and they're both involved in group therapy once a week. And then there's also a lot of assigned reading. They read our blogs, they watch our videos, they read Healing the Shame That Binds You. Hopefully they'll read my abandonment book, and other ebooks that you can get online, familytreecounseling.com, throw in a commercial. But during the therapy, I'm sure that most of you have seen the movie Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon and Robin Williams, who played the best therapist in the history of movies. In the first session, he's this South Boston character, tough guy, and this other Matt Damon comes in and starts showing him disrespect, and he reaches out and grabs him by the throat and threatens to kill him, which I've never tried in a therapy session. I've been tempted to try that with a couple fellows through the years, but I've never actually done it. But that's a dramatic version of really what therapy can do, because in the dramatic scene where there's crying and hugs, Robin Williams says, it's not your fault. The fact that your stepfather beat you with a belt and beat you with a wrench, that's not your fault. And Matt Damon said, yeah, I know. But he kept emphasizing it until it really got into his spirit. And so Robin Williams was able to reach in and grab a hold of his heart and find that wounded inner child. And what did he do then? He cried. He sobbed. So he taught him the truth, and he had insight, and then he had a good cry. And in that movie, he went through like 4 or 5 therapists who couldn't reach the guy, and then he found one who made all the difference in the world. And a strong, really assertive therapist who's done his own work, who's not going to take any crap, is worth his weight in gold, because he or she can change your whole life if you get the message that this is shame. Do not shame yourself. Is rooted in your childhood wounds, and the best way to heal it is to know the truth about who you are and where you came from, and to cry, and let it flow out of your system. So what recovery will do for you through the years, it'll take a harsh, critical voice, and it'll soothe that voice. It'll soften your shaming voice and sort of sweeten it up, and it'll mellow out. Remember back from the 70s, Olivia Newton-John, Have You Never Been Mellow? I'm not going to sing, but that's what I'm talking about. And also, I think in recovery, I was listening to John Bradshaw's book on shame the other day, and he said another indication of recovery from shame is having humor. So this is how recovery works. It doesn't work quickly, but the good news is shame responds very well. I called it healing the shame. You can't heal shame. You're not going to heal a lot of abandonment. You're going to have to manage your abandonment, but you can heal shame. So, like I said, you can get ebooks from myself on our website, familytreecounseling.com, and there are other videos on shame. But this is how recovery works. So I hope your shame has been lifted through some insight, and I hope you take that insight and do the emotional work that will make you healthier and happier over time. So God bless.